Well, hi guys. We are going to talk about the role of pragmatic markers in academic spoken interlanguage, a corpus-based study of a group of Brazilian EFL university students. Our group members are Ana Cláudia, Gabriela Rosa, and Riva Duarte. The authors of these articles are Ana Larissa Dono Marciotto Oliveira, Bárbara Malveira Orfanó, and Spencer Barbosa da Silva. I am Ana Cláudia, and I'm going to make an introduction to you with the definitions and the objectives of this article. Next, please. Well, the objective of this article is to investigate the use of pragmatic markers by a group of university students of English. It considers an oral production. Next, please. The methodology used in this article is two groups, two corpuses, one corpus and one base corpus, in which this corpus is the BRAINS, the Brazilian Academic English Students, and the subcorpus is the British Academic Spoken English data. So we are going to transcribe and organize and analyze some what we call pragmatic markers. The main questions for this research are what the most commonly patterns found in the corpora analyzed, and if they are different, what are the impact and the discrepancy in the academic domain. Next, please. Before we start this article and we start to talk about this research, I am going to make a previous observation, and I'm going to talk about the pragmatic study. Pragmatic study. Well, what is the pragmatic study? It is the language analysis that considers the communication influence inside the context, which means that this goes beyond the syntax and beyond the semantics. The communication in this case is what matters. And the pragmatic concentrates in the process, specifically in what we comprehend in the implicit communication. So go next to see the example. This example is like the girl saying, it's so cold here. So when you say it's so cold here and the window is open, you understand implicitly that you have to close the window. So this is pragmatic. When someone says something and you have to understand beyond that. So I explained that to explain to you what are those pragmatic markers. And I gave this introduction to explain the objective of the research. Well, next, please. The pragmatic markers are constructions presenting speech that helps interaction but does not change the semantic meaning in the message, which means that it is some things we add to our discourse. Next, please. Well, you can click to everything. What and why the pragmatic markers help us? Because allows the speaker to communicate their intentions, explain the attitude toward the information, function as a negative politeness, which means that negative politeness means that softening the imposition of academic language. That is, when you have to explain something in an academic language, you can use pragmatic markers to soften and make your explanation less hard to explain. And if you don't understand what pragmatic markers are yet, I gave you some examples like just and maybe. And to be more specific, in this article, we have the Fraser example that we have two sentences. Like the first one, we left late. And the second one, using a pragmatic marker. In spite of that, we arrived on time. So in this case, the pragmatic marker here is in spite of that, because we can add some points that doesn't change the meaning of our message, but can say more than we are trying to say. Next, please.
Hello, my name is Gabriela, and I will try to explain a little bit further on the notion of politeness and the strategies that we use to employ it and in current phase work, and therefore project our images and the images of the others involved in this exchange. First, we have this notion of politeness. So, politeness, it would be the value that a person has for itself, right? It's a conception of Goffman, and it regards all of those that are involved in an exchange. So, every time we are communicating, there are two people involved in this exchange. Therefore, there are four faces. Why four faces? Because each one of the individual have a positive and a negative face. The positive phase regards our needs to be accepted and approved, whereas the negative phase regards our desire to have our space respected and our individuality respected, right? Later on, Levison and Brown, they developed the notion of politeness. So politeness is basically we considering other people's feelings, right? When the other person's feelings are considered and their opinions regarding the utterances that we are producing. So while we are saying something, we try to convey it in a way that will be well accepted by others, and therefore we resort to be polite, to respect the faces, to respect the desires of the other person. Um, that is done through face work. So face work is a linguistic procedure that we tackle in order to soften or intensify what we say and achieving politeness. Here we have an example here. Here Calvin is very upset and he's angering, right? So he's jeopardizing his positive face. He's screaming, and nobody likes people who scream, or most of the people don't like people who scream, and therefore he's jeopardizing his positive face because he might be not accepted or approved by his behavior, right? Nonetheless, his mother sees this behavior, and she decided that actually she's going to give a specific approach. She's not going to confront him, right? Instead of just screaming and telling him what to do, she tries to save her positive face. She's trying to be accepted and approved by her son. She's trying to have her message accepted and approved. So considering how he's feeling, she's very kind, right? So she is encouraging face work. Uh, Finally, these concepts are important because they are going to be the theoretical basis, right, in which we are going to study and perceive how Brazilian students recur to those strategies in academic environment. Pragmatic markers are going to help study how Brazilian students resort to politeness in those environments.
Okay, hello guys, I'm Riva and I'm going to talk about the methodology and data collection used in this study. Next, please. All right, about the data collection, the studies used two corpora. The first one is BRACE. It's an abbreviation for Brazilian Academic Spoken English. And this is the main corpus. It consists of 20-minute oral presentations by students of the course English for Academic Purposes at UFMG. This corpus has 50,000 words. All right, and the other is BASE, the abbreviation for British Academic Spoken English. It is actually a subcorpus compiled for this study specifically. And it consists of over 1,600,000 words. Next. Right, about the methodology. Well, the data was transcribed, organized, and then the metadata was also included in the study. Then it was used the software Wordsmith Tools 5.0 to analyze the data. And then some items fulfilling different functions were eliminated from the analysis. After all of this procedure, a list of metalinguistic monitors was created. Next. Okay, so about the metalinguistic monitors, with 1 word, 2 word, 3, 4 words word generator. However, it's presented here the 1 word such as maybe and just, the pragmatic markers, maybe and just for the speech, and the 2 words clusters such as you know, kind of, and I think. Next. Okay, but in this study, the only one included was the 2 word clusters. The presented study concentrates on the items of 2 word clusters because it is the most fruitful list and it is used to compare both corpora. Next, please. Right, about the data analysis, the investigation starts with metalinguistic monitors. Can you go to the next, please? Okay, the metalinguistic monitors with 1 word item, and then with the 2 word clusters. The data was submitted to statistical tests and finally getting the results, which are going to be presented soon in this presentation. Next. Okay, here we have the statistical analysis for 1 word elements. Next. This is table 1 for consideration. It shows that the frequency of the use of 1 word items are higher in BASE, in the British one, than it is in the Brazilian group. And it is in Braze we have the concentration in 2 items, the pragmatic markers just and maybe. Next, please. Okay, so now it is a graph representing the 1 word item in the linguistic corpus. Pay attention that the use of just is much higher than the others. So the use of just in the base corpus, of course, is much, much higher. Next. Okay, now you're going to see that the item just is an example, a sample of overuse word in Brazilian corpus.
So here it's me again, Gabriela. I forgot to introduce me the first time.
No, actually, I keep going, please. The next one, sorry. What? Okay, thank you, Gabriela. So according to Yamir, the pragmatic marker just has procedural meaning, functions as a sign to the hearer to interpret the speaker's utterance as an expression of an attitude. So how Brazilian students use the item just? They actually overuse it as a downtoning head with the purpose of modifying face threat. The study shows that Brazilian learners do not comply with the formality of oral academic discourse because they tend to use markers, the pragmatic markers, that are used in informal contexts, academic informal contexts, actually. Next. So here we have an example from the corpus. The volume is basically the volume of the cylinder, and the cost is just the cost of all material involved. So the pragmatic marker, just in this case, it is used to soften the nutrients gave by this person. So it's an example of overuse. This is an example that shows how students are not aware of the academic formal discourse. And this type of use of this item does not match with academic performance of English. Next. Okay, let's start analyzing the statistics for two-word clusters, please. Next. Right, this is table 3. And it presents the most frequent two-word clusters in the study. Again, it shows that the numbers are higher in base than it is in the Brazilian. So we have examples like kind of or a kind of in the base, most used, right? And I think in the Brazilian one. So in this graph, we can see that the cluster I think is higher in the Brazilian one, I think. And kind of cluster is greater in the British one. So the next, please. After all the analysis, it's confirmed that the Brazilian students overuse the cluster I think compared to base, the British one. And they underuse the clusters kind of and also you know in relation to base corpus. Thank you.
So now it's me, right? I am Gabriela, and I will be talking about I think as a sample of overuse. The researchers have found that the cluster I think was being overused among Brazilian students. And they fitted this cluster, they fitted this pragmatic marker into different categories, different semantic categories. One is the deliberative category that people use to express confidence, when people employ it to express confidence. And the other one is the tentative, in which the users use to express uncertainty. The focus here is to understand how users, to investigate the situations in which they use it to express uncertainty. Why? Because in academic environments, it's expected that you leave some space for some room for cooperation, that your statement is not so impositive, and because of that, your speech is perceived as polite, right? So what was noticed as well by the authors is that the use of I think might be interference of the first language, right? Because in Portuguese, to say eu acho, it's very common. However, the problem is that this is in English language very associated to academic environments. It's very associated to casual conversation and not necessarily to academic environment. So it's not seen so well. And so this is probably the problem, right? This is one of the problems of using the cluster, I think. It indicates at the end, it indicates that a lack of domain of the academic genre. So and ended up not fulfilling the function that it should have of soften edges, right? The interlocutors fulfill of expectations of what should be done in an academic environment, it's not achieved. Finally, the authors have established that the cluster, I think, has functions in, it has two functions. It functions to show uncertainty by what they have found, consider Brazilian corpus, is that it shows uncertainty, and as well is used as an epistemic marker influenced by the mother tongue. We have here an example. I think it might be a kind of revenge revenge against the society, that maybe against something that he has lived in the air. Here, this person uses I think, it might be, a kind of. So the use of I think, it's intensified by all of those elements. And in the end, the level of uncertainty is too high. Later on, we have the cluster as a sample of underuse, right? So the cluster again, the authors show that Holmes established that the cluster has two main functions. Those functions would be to express confidence and to express uncertainty as well. How Brazilians use this cluster? It's mostly used to mark assertiveness. So therefore, it's used to express confidence and certainty. However, the object of this research was mainly to try to identify the situations in which the cluster was used to express uncertainty, for the same reason as I think, right? Because it will be a face-saving strategy, a face work strategy. But what the research has shown is that Brazilians don't use it in order to soften the edges, right? And that is the problem. That would be a problem because it shows that Brazilians don't understand very well how this cluster can have this double meaning, this double functions. And as well, it might seem to the interlocutor that the locutor is being too assertive, that he's leaving no space for negotiations. Here we have another example. Now you have said something, you said something interesting, because when Lula was campaigning for the first time, there was the same euphoria about him, and remember when Lula was elected for president, the parties around the country, it was in a way the same kind of feeling. So here it's just assuming that the other person knows something, right? It's a mark of assertiveness. Okay.
Okay, I'm Anna back again, and I'm going to talk about the final remarks and what we conclude with this analysis and this article. Next, please. So we saw that the words analyzed what those maybe, just, and the clusters I think, kind of, and But we noticed that the word just, go to the next, please. The word just was the most common and the most used by the both corpora. So the focus of this analysis was understand what caused and what was the clusters and the pragmatic markers used by the both groups and how they use those. So just was overused by the Braves, by the Brazilian students, and indicates markers from the informal oral discourse in the oral academic presentation, which means they don't know, or they don't know how to separate the both kind of communication, and the unawareness of the norms guiding the academic context. Next, please. Then the clusters, I think, and you know, have more variation on base and less use on the brace. So the base, the British, and brace, the Brazilian. Brace maintain both markers in very restricted forms, I think, and you know, used like the main meaning. Once the base use those like more variable meanings. And we conclude that there is a rigid repertoire from the brains. So the conclusions are: one, a limit in the discourse and ability to communicate in an effective way by the brains. But at the same time, this article can contribute to raise cultural and linguistic awareness, and also indicates that there is a lack of explicit instructions to help the way for more effective interpersonal interaction in the academic scenario. So we conclude that the Brazilians has to be instructed explicitly about these clusters and about these pragmatic markers in order to open this vocabulary and in order to be aware of what we have to what we can use and what we cannot use in the academic environment.
So this was our work, and this is the reference that we bring for you guys, and we'd like to thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.